joined the meeting.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for being here this morning. We're very excited here at Bernheim to be celebrating Bat Week. Bat Week is a celebration of all things bat or flying mammal. And, this year it's October 24th through the 31st. So it commences with Halloween. And some of you all may know Bernheim is a very important location for bats, not just here in Kentucky, but really an important site here throughout North America. So my name is Andrew Berry. I'm the Director of Conservation at Bernheim, and we're going to be going through a slideshow today. And then at the end, we hope to have a nice Q&A session, and you all can ask anything about bats or anything about nature in general or Bernheim related questions. So with that, let's just get going. I wanted to start off, it is part of our, we're within our membership drive, which is going through the entire month of October. Bernheim's members are so important for supporting what we do here. We have over 5,000 members now at Bernheim, and through their support and participation with the organization, we're able to provide world-class nature-based education, world-class arboretum, horticulture exhibits, children at play and play ecosystem, and also protect over 16,000 acres of forest, which is beneficial not just for wildlife, but for our people and our communities. So hope if you're not a member that you would consider joining this week, in the last week of our membership drive. You will receive $5 off if you use the special code 2021 Trailblazer. So again, thank you for being a member, or please consider becoming one. So October is really a great month for wildlife. I just love it. And you think about the spooky stuff, maybe like the spiders in the lower right, or maybe the snakes, like the rattlesnakes. The rattlesnakes are all heading into their communal hibernacula, and they're all getting ready to settle down for the winter. Spiders are finishing up rearing their young and getting ready for winter as well. Some of y'all been seeing the monarch butterflies that have been flying north to south. If you see them here at Bernheim, they're almost always flying south at this time of year. And again, they congregate down in Mexico. With this group, you all are lucky. Y'all are the first people to hear that the golden eagles are back on their way to Bernheim. And our female, Athena, just checked in yesterday afternoon, and she is in Ontario near a place called Pipestone Provincial Park. So stay tuned as we get more information on that, and hope to get an announcement out soon about that. But that's always exciting. And we expect the golden eagles will probably be back here sometime in early November. So again, it is Bat Week, and we're celebrating all things bat. If you want some more information on that, there is a nice website set up that has information and educational materials for children and adults. And I guess the overarching message here is that Bernheim works to protect and promote bats. We protect them by stewarding our land, by protecting our forests, and we promote them by educating people about them, hosting groups like the Kentucky Bat Working Group that did a bat blitz here that I'll talk about in just a few minutes, and working with groups like the Imperiled Bat Conservation Fund to make sure that as land is impacted around us, which we've all been seeing, that development and other pressures have been put upon our natural world around Louisville and Bernheim, that as those lands are impacted, that other lands are protected to offset those losses. So I have quite a few bat photographs, but none of them are as incredible as what you can find online. And so, for example, this picture of a bat, horseshoe bat with a moth in its mouth. This is by Merlin Tuttle, one of the leading bat biologists and conservationists of the last century. And, cameras now are allowing people to do incredible things and to capture these images of bats in flight, foraging, drinking. It's just incredible what kinds of videos and pictures are coming up with. But this picture, just kind of highlight bats are important as insectivores. They control populations of insects, particularly around Bernheim. All of our bats are insectivores. So our larger bats eat things like moths, and then a lot of the smaller ones, you know, down to the little brown bats, eat a lot of small things like mosquitoes and gnats, which are really can be pesky. So they play an incredible role within our not only the natural world, but in human society, helping to reduce and control insect populations. This is just a quick little graphic that shows about how bats can forage. They use echolocation. And so essentially they're sending out a pulse towards an object, and then that return coming back to them tells them how far it is to that object, and it allows them to hone in on it and to go and grab it. So in the case of the above, what we would call an aerial hawker, this is your big brown bat, one of our most common species around Bernheim and throughout the eastern United States. And they primarily, being a big brown bat, they feed on larger insects like beetles and moths. And then some of the other ones, like on the lower panel here, the fringe nose bat, which is from out west, is a substrate gleaner. So he has a little different use of his echolocation in the way he uses it to find creatures that are down amongst the brush. You know, this is a bat that lives in heavily forested and brushy areas, and so being able to get insects out of vegetation is important. Bats are gleaners, and so gleaning means refers to bats that don't just fly around eating insects like we commonly think that they do. A lot of times, some of these bat species, like here in Kentucky, the big-eared bats, the RAFINESQUE'S big-eared bats, will actually crawl around on the ground looking for prey. So this is a pallid bat from out west, and this bat has actually crawled around and found a scorpion to eat. And they utilize their, you know, they've got wings and they've got feet, and they're able to, you know, just like a lot of mammals, crawl around looking for prey. Not in Kentucky, but in other parts of the world, bats are very important as pollinators. Primarily, a lot of these night blooming white flowered cacti, which are found out west or found in the desert situations down into Mexico, those are often pollinated by bats. So this is a picture of a Mexican long-nosed bat pollinating a saguaro cactus with the moonlight behind it. Just a beautiful image. And this next one here shows what a bat looks like after it's been out foraging all night amongst those cactuses. You can see how it's just covered in pollen. It makes my allergies get going just to look at this picture. But you know, these bats are, you know, incredibly important. And while we don't think that they have a role in pollination here in Kentucky, I think we could be surprised to find what bats are really doing. We're still learning a lot about what exactly bats are doing at night. They're a very cryptic species, and a lot of what we know is based on people catching bats, and then when you capture them, they don't necessarily act naturally. So still learning a lot. I think one of the cool facts that really intrigues a lot of people is that, you know, bats are flying mammals, and as flying mammals, they give live birth. And in this case, this is a red bat here, which is one of our most common bats at Bernheim. They can actually give up to give birth to 3 pups at a time. And so, yep, the little bats are called pups, and they actually will usually give birth to the babies in a safe location, and then we'll actually fly through the forest with the pups clinging on to the mothers, and we'll move them place to place to safe locations. In the case of Indiana bats, which use maternity roosts in Bernheim, they actually go off on their own, have their pups, and then bring them all together and then store the pups communally in these maternity roosts, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But it's just incredible to think about that, and you know, people have a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that they're just small mammals. And here's a really incredible image of bats drinking. So when you see bats flitting around ponds at night, they are capturing insects that are flying around the ponds, but they're also swooping down and getting drinks. You know, they burn a lot of calories, and they're on the wing during hot times of the year. So of course they do got to stop and drink quite a bit. And this is what it looks like if you actually slowed it down. Pretty incredible stuff. So one of the more important concepts around bats is that they hibernate, and that they depend upon hibernacula, which are usually very long established locations where they feel safe and they have the right conditions in order to overwinter. The reason they have to do this is because you know, in the winter, there's not as much food to eat. Obviously, there's not a lot of insects out flying around. Also, it's really cold, and it's just unfavorable for the small flying mammals to be out. So these hibernacula sometimes have been used for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. This is a group of Indiana bats, which is a federally endangered species that we do have here at Bernheim. And they have just a limited number of caves, which have the right conditions, being temperature and being protected and being located generally around the Ohio River watershed. So you'll find a lot of these Indiana bat hibernacula located just across the river over in southern Indiana. We also have some here in Kentucky. And the ones that we do have are pretty rigorously protected now, because getting the bats through the winter is very important if we're going to keep them around. Here's an image of some people doing a count on an Indiana bat hibernacula. You can see that these folks are all wearing cave gear, but they're also wearing white suits. We're in I'll talk about this some more in a little bit, but we're in a situation now where these hibernacula have been infected with a deadly fungus that are impacting the bats as they roost. We see a lot of impacts to bat habitat also just from people going into caves. And this has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. You know, you look back to the earliest humans were drawn to these caves because of the climate and the temperature control during the winter in there. You know, you can get in a cave and it's warm in the winter, it's cool in the summer. It shelters you from the elements. And so people and bats have been coming into contact for thousands of years, but recently it's really increased to where it's not just that people are living in caves, but they're also recreating all through caves, even into the deepest parts of them. We're using them as tourist locations, like here at Mammoth Cave, which has seen the bat numbers just plummet over the last few hundred years. We're also seeing a loss of habitat. So a lot of these bats depend upon forests and trees and places like Bernheim throughout the summer. And we're seeing that steadily be eroded. This is just down the road from Bernheim, where you can see large warehouses and a highway project that are cutting into the knobs, damaging bat habitat. And you know, with every tree that's lost, we have more and more impact on the bats as a whole. But overwhelmingly, over the last coming up on 2 decades, the white nose syndrome has been one of the biggest detriments to bats or all wildlife. I mean, they say that actually the white nose syndrome is probably the worst wildlife disease that we have seen in North America in human times. And you know, this thing has been here since at least 2006. It was thought to be brought over by a group of cavers from Europe who came to the United States for a caving conference in Pennsylvania. They went and visited some caves. They had no idea that they might be harboring this fungus, which was on their boots and their caving equipment. And they went and visited a bunch of caves, and they think that that's how it got going here. Since then, it has spread not just throughout the Northeast, but it's spread all the way through most of North America. It's being detected now out in the Western United States. In some areas, we've seen bat populations decrease by 90 to even 100% in some of these caves where all bats have been lost. It definitely hurts some species more than others. Indiana bat is pictured here, and you can see the white fungus on his nose. It doesn't outright kill them, but it causes them to be in such distress that often they'll wake up early from hibernation and they'll go out and try to forage, and there won't be any food sources out there. And then the bats usually die right there at the entrance of the cave. So it's a horrible thing. We're seeing it not just on Indians, but we're seeing it on little brown bats. This is a MYOTIS species, a cave bat. And we're seeing that the ones that are hit hardest are the cave bats that are small. So small size leads to less fat reserves, which leads to less ability to deal with the white nose. Little brown bat is one that was almost wiped out throughout most of the eastern United States. They do think that they may be going through a bottleneck right now, and some resistant individuals are starting to reproduce, and they may be bouncing back. This is a picture of a cluster of little brown bats with white nose fungus on each one of them, and you can also see it on their arms. Little brown bat is a really cool species that feeds primarily on mosquitoes and gnats and other small insects. So it's a great one to have around, and they've absolutely plummeted. And then the northern long-eared bat. This is a very sad picture of a little northern long-eared, which has probably been impacted more than any other species by this. And there is actually some thought that the northern long-eared bat could go extinct within the next 5 to 10 years. And this is a bat that was one of the most frequently caught just a decade ago in a lot of areas. And so, you know, there is no cure for this, and the way that bats are living communally in these caves is what's really causing it to spread and persist. And so just unsure about what the future may bring for this species here. So to better understand Bernheim and how important we are for bats, we work with a number of different organizations. And this year in August, we were lucky to conduct the Kentucky Bat Blitz 2021 with the Kentucky Bat Working Group. And this group is made up of bat biologists and researchers and consultants from all over the eastern United States. But we want to give a special thank you to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Imperiled Bat Conservation Fund, and also the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, who had some key staff that were running this event and coordinating it. We caught 143 bats during those 2 nights in August, which was a really good haul. That was I had a lot of these researchers tell me they hadn't seen that many bats in a long time. And you know, you hear some of the stories from them as they're working in other parts of the country. They're saying, you know, we don't see any northern long-eared bats anymore. We don't see any little brown bats anymore. And to have those found here at Bernheim, we only found 1 northern long-eared bat, which is way down from previous years, but it does show that there's at least a few that are hanging on here at Bernheim. And the little brown bats that were captured over in Cave Hollow are also a good sign. It shows that population has not dropped out totally here in Kentucky. So some promising results there. The other one is the tricolored bat, which we also caught a few of those in Cave Hollow, and that's another species that's been heavily impacted by white nose. And so Bernheim, we've been doing bat research for a number of decades now. We do it through not just mist netting, which is what we did at the Bat Blitz, but we also do acoustic monitoring, which is where we have devices out in the forest which record sounds, the echolocation sounds that bats make. And it's able to identify them to species level based upon those calls. And so in our history, Bernheim has documented 13 of Kentucky's 16 bat species. That's pretty incredible. And that just goes to demonstrate that Bernheim is a unique place with large forests and the associated habitats to help a lot of these bat populations survive. Let's see. Here's a look at the map of Bernheim, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but I will say Bernheim is now 16,140 acres. And we've grown by almost 2,000 acres in the last decade. partially because we've been able to tap into funds from sources like the Imperiled Bat Conservation Fund. So the bat research that we do here, and we're able to show that we still have viable populations of these bats, it allows us to apply for funding to add land onto Bernheim, the forested areas, and just continue to provide better habitat and corridors for bats and other wildlife. So bats are kind of one of those umbrella species. If you can protect enough space for bats, you're protecting a lot of other things like migratory birds and bobcats and everything else. So again, Bernheim Forest as a location is incredibly important. We've also found that Fort Knox and a lot of these other forests around the Ohio River, particularly downstream of Louisville, are incredibly important for cave bats like the Indiana bat. We've been able to add places like Cave Hollow to Bernheim in the last decade, which is just a phenomenal location for bats. We've got a few that hibernate in here, but mostly this is a fantastic summer roost for bats. We've got a number of different species that are using this throughout the summer. We've got wonderful mixed habitats like this location at Golden Eagle Ridge, where you have a mixture of forests and prairies and rock outcrops spread out through there, and water. You know, bats generally forage around or near water. Again, they drink regularly during the night, so they have to swoop in and be able to refresh. But also water is a big source of insects. So anytime you've got a hatch from mayflies or other aquatic insects, these bats are able to come in and take advantage of that. And wetlands, you know, the bats are roosting in dead and dying trees and snags. And these wetlands, particularly like this beaver wetland down in the Wilson Valley at Bernheim, provide incredible opportunities for these bats to forage, to raise their pups, and to make it through the summer. So while it is doom and gloom with some species, I will say that there are a couple that are doing well in Bernheim and doing well throughout the eastern United States. One of them is the red bat. The red bat is a really cool species, being that it is larger. It has a beautiful reddish fur to it, but it's also a tree bat. And being a tree bat, it means it's not roosting communally in those cool, damp caves where the white nose syndrome is festering in the winter. And, you know, you'll actually find these red bats out and about in the winter. You might notice them on a warm day. They might be out flying around your yard, eating moths that come out. Sometimes when we do prescribed fires early in the year, like in February, you'll actually see these red bats come out of leaf litter. So they actually will hide under leaf litter on the forest floor and just kind of go into a state of torpor where they can get really, really cold, but it doesn't hurt them that bad, you know, and they've got thick fur and they're just well adapted to it. And the red bat numbers have actually increased, we think, in the last decade. So white nose has not hurt them, and they're kind of filling that niche that some of these other bats, as they're dropping out, the red bats are moving up. This is a great picture by John McGregor of Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, who's just an incredible bat biologist, of a red bat in a maple tree. And so this is how they hide out during the summer, and they stash their pups up in these leaves, and you just don't notice them unless you really know they're there. And so much going on in the tree canopy we don't know about. Another one that's doing well is the big brown bat. And big brown bat is a cave species, but he's a little more varied in what he can tolerate. So we'll find that they live in caves, but they also might live in your attic, and they might live under your porch, and they might live, you know, in a belfry in an old church, you know, like bats in the belfry. Those are probably big brown bats. They also can live in hollow trees, but they might go in a cave too. And what we found is that while they do harbor the white nose syndrome, it doesn't really affect them. I think maybe because they're bigger, maybe it's because they're just better at going out and foraging in the winter. You know, no matter what the reason is, they seem to also be increasing in numbers. And this is probably one of the more common bats that you're going to see in the evening. flying around your house, particularly maybe even in the winter too. If you see bats in the winter during the colder months, they're almost always going to be a big brown or a red bat. So that's great. I mean, while we talk about losing the bats, what we mean more is probably losing a lot of the cave bats. But there are some species that are still doing okay. Here's a really cool species, not just in Bernheim, but throughout the eastern United States. I just wanted to highlight a couple of these cool ones that we've got that people aren't really familiar with. This is the eastern small-footed MYOTIS, and they're relatively unknown, and they were actually petitioned to go on the federal endangered species list along with the northern long-eared bat. Now, the northern long-eared is the one I mentioned before, is on the cusp of extinction right now because of white nose. Less is known about these eastern small-footed MYOTIS, but we do think that they're a little bit more resilient, even though they're a really tiny bat, because they roost solitarily and they roost in a lot of cracks and nooks and crannies. So here's a picture from Bernheim. This is a nice little rock outcrop along a stream area, and you can see how there's boulders and layers of rock, and there's all kinds of little pock marks and cracks and crevices back in there. This is what the small-footed MYOTIS likes. This is where they want to be. And you don't see them a lot. You don't catch them in nets a lot. But we do record their calls with echolocation throughout Bernheim. And so we're just really proud to have this as one of our pieces of biodiversity. Another one that we've found through echolocation, but also through just him leaving little signs and little clues, is the RAFINESQUE'S big-eared bat. And the RAFINESQUE'S big-eared bat is really an awesome species. You can see the size of his ears, very large. He's a large bat in general, up to, I think they say 8 inches long. And we started getting echolocation hits from this bat over in Cave Hollow shortly after we added that property. And we thought it was peculiar because they hadn't been documented in this area yet. But we did notice that we had the habitat, meaning we had caves and cliffs over there. But in particular, these RAFINESQUE big-eared bats like sandstone cliffs, sandstone outcroppings and cliffs, because maybe if you're familiar with places like the Red River Gorge or other sandstony cliff areas, you'll notice that they often will crack and they'll form big fissures down through there. Those fissures let the RAFINESQUE big-eared bat go way back in there and safely avoid predators and things like that. But it's also one of the bats that does a lot of gleaning. And if you remember from early in the talk, gleaning is where a bat will actually land on the ground and crawl around and look for prey. And we find areas over in Cave Hollow where they leave their telltale wing clipping piles. And so a RAFINESQUE will crawl around, find a moth, take it back to its little spot, and then rip its wings off. And it leaves the little wings in a little pile very neatly while it eats the moth. And it's the only species that does that. And so when you find those little wing clip piles over there around the entrance to the cave, you know that the RAFINESQUE has been there. So this is one of my favorite bat species. Just a beautiful bat, named after the famous biologist RAFINESQUE, who was a professor at Transylvania University, great botanist, biologist. And actually, he was the first person to discover it. It's a funny story. He was actually staying over at John James Audubon's house down in Henderson, Kentucky. And he was sleeping, and he woke up and there was a bat flying around his room. And so the first thing he did was jump up and he grabs Audubon's prized violin. I think it was a Stradivarius or something like that. And the story goes, he took Audubon's violin, chased the bat around, and smashed it, and smashed the violin and the bat together. And he collected this first specimen. That's not how bat biologists work today. We don't smash bats, but it's just an interesting story about how this bat came to be named after RAFINESQUE. Okay, so the next bat, I'm going to come back to the northern long-eared bat. The northern long-eared bat is the one that we think is going to go extinct here in the next 10 years. So this is one, you all may have seen that story about extinction that's happening around the United States, and how they had just declared 22 species to be officially extinct. We are worried that this may be the next one. Just a small cave bat, very susceptible to white nose. The work that we've been doing here at Bernheim, been trying to understand not just what's happening in the population, but what are these individuals doing? And so it was several years ago, we were able to actually track a northern long-eared bat that we captured over in Cave Hollow. And so we put these transmitters on them that are glued on, and they only stay on for up to 5 days, and then they'll fall off and the bat's totally unharmed. But what we caught here was a female that was in post-lactation. So that meant that she had been nursing her pups somewhere, and by August, she had wrapped up nursing them, and the pups have then gone onto the wing, and they're flying around doing their own thing. But she's still going back to those maternity roosts where all the northerns congregate. So we put a tracker on her, and we were able to track her across Bernheim over into one of our new properties over in the Cedar Grove Wildlife Corridor. You all may know of that term based upon the pipeline we've been fighting over there. It's just a beautiful series of knobs and forests, and it's incredible bat habitat, and that's why we were able to get bat conservation funding to purchase it. And so we identified these 2 trees as being the ones that this female bat was using. And it just goes to show, these are overlooked trees in the whole forest setting. I mean, one of them is looks like a hickory that was blown over in a windstorm, and it's got a lot of bark and wood shavings and stuff hanging off it. And those just provide a lot of little nooks and crannies for those bats to get in and hide during the day. And on the right, that's a standing snag of an oak tree. And it doesn't look like much. And a lot of people would see very little value of those types of trees in the forest. But they're critically important for bats and for these maternity colonies that they've got to form, because, just as there's not a lot that Bernheim could do to protect bats when they're in their caves from white nose syndrome and those sorts of things. But what Bernheim can do is to provide incredible summer habitat and provide maternity spots like these snags and broken trees that we've got all through our forest, so that they can be successful at raising their young. So just as bats are dying from white nose, new bats are being born every year, and hopefully there's going to be some sort of a genetic resiliency that's going to arrive out of that process. It's going to allow the population to adapt and resist eventually. Another way that we are helping bats is by installing some of these maternity roost, artificial maternity roost. It's a product called BRANDENBARK, and it's actually named for a biologist over at Fort Knox, where these bat poles were invented. Mike Brandenburg is a biologist over there at Fort Knox, and they've been doing a lot of work because they are the largest Indiana bat maternity site in the world. Bernheim is just 6 or 7 miles as the bat flies from Fort Knox, and so a lot of those bats are interacting and coming back and forth between these 2 sites. But this maternity roost, basically what you've got there is a telephone pole with a artificial piece of bark on top. It's kind of a rubberized substrate, and it's got a crack on it, a lot like these sloughing bark on trees, that allows the bats to go up in there and to stash their young in there. And then at the bottom, you can see we've got a little screen and a little box there that allows the guano, so the bat poop falls out, and we can see whether it's active by looking at the bat poop on the screen. And you can also get an idea of what species is, and you can get an idea of about how many you have in there and how active it is. So these have been really successful, and they allow us to document that we have maternity roosts of Indiana bats, allow us to know about how many there are, and it helps us to work with bat biologists to monitor them. So this is a juvenile Indiana bat that actually came out of one of those polls. We're able to net those and capture some of the bats that come out in the evening. This juvenile here, you can kind of see on there on his right wing there that he's got a band. And so we've been banding these bats. It doesn't hurt him. It's just a small little marker. And in doing this for several years, we found that some of these bats are recaptured. And these are adults that have been coming back to the same site and raising their pups every year. And then also we've got the pups that come back and join in too. And the maternity colony has been growing. So that's, demonstrating some success in keeping these bats around. Here's another picture from John McGregor, our esteemed bat biologist here in Kentucky, of an Indiana bat that they've been tracking, and they found it under some loose bark. So that the loose bark on dead and dying trees is one of the most important types of habitat for bats during the summer, especially for raising their young, but also for hiding out from predators. They come back and forth to these trees throughout the night to help digest and rest, and then they head back out. So in addition to the bat roosts and the bat research and everything else that we've got going on, I think land protection is one of the best things that Bernheim can do for bats. Just protecting what we've got, teaching people about how important it is, trying to fight projects that are going to damage or destroy forest habitat throughout Bernheim, such as the LG&E pipeline. These are all important steps that Bernheim takes to keep bats around. And then nature-based education. I mean, it's all about educating the youth and adults about the importance of wildlife and bats. And Bernheim is an incredible venue for that. And so we're very lucky to have this forest and also an engaged community of school groups and also members and donors and research partners that make Bernheim such a successful place. And so with that kind of wraps up most of the prepared slides that I have. But if anybody has any questions, I'm glad to talk about anything concerning bats, concerning Bernheim, or nature in general. So thank you all. Is everybody muted? Maybe we should do questions through the chat. Does anybody have any questions they want to type in?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
You said, was it 10 or 20 species went extinct over?
So the new report from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service talked about 22 species that have gone extinct within the last, I'd say, last 50 years or so. And those aren't all bats. So it includes stuff like the ivory-billed woodpecker and some of the others that have disappeared. Yeah. No bats on that list yet, but it is thought that the northern long-eared bat could be joining that list soon.
Okay.
Thanks, Kenyatta. Anybody else? Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, I will just.
There's some questions in the chat, I think.
Oh, are there? Oh, okay, here we go. Oh, good. All right. Will this presentation be available? Yes, I think we will work to get it up and online. I think it was recorded, so I think we could probably put the whole thing up. Will bat houses help in suburban neighborhoods? Yes, they do. They do. Bat houses are great for providing a place for bats to stop and rest and digest during the evening. Also, some species will raise their young in them if they're in the right location. So I would suggest doing a little bit of research about what makes a good location for a bat house. Now, you would think that they would probably want it all shady and cool, but actually a lot of these bat houses are supposed to be in full sun. So do a little bit of research and The other thing that they do is they might help keep your bats from getting into troubling situations. So like if there's enough bat houses out in the neighborhood for bats to use, they may not try to congregate in somebody's attic or something that might get them into trouble. So yeah, that definitely helps. And if you're interested in going bigger than just your normal little bat house, there's some really incredible rocket boxes and other things that can actually be used as maternity roosts, which would allow you to look up in there and check periodically and maybe even have a bunch of pups coming out. And that's going to help you out too, because they might eat all the mosquitoes and gnats out of your backyard. And you know, that's a good thing, right? Let's see. What makes a cave a good cave for a bat to live in? Oh, that's good. How old do bats usually live to be? Oh, those are good questions. So what makes a good cave for bats? It has a lot to do with temperature. So, you know, how is that cave situated in the landscape? How deep is it? Does it have any other air passages through it? Those things all factor into making it suitable for bats. They also like caves that aren't disturbed a lot. So caves that are in urban areas that are open for people to go in often aren't the best areas for cave bats, especially when you're talking about hibernating throughout the winter. So it's good for them to be a little bit protected and sheltered and not be open to everybody. How old do bats usually live to be? That's a great question. I think that they can live definitely for over 10 years, but how often do they make it that long in the wild? It's hard to say. I do believe that I've heard of people recapturing bats like up to 5 or 6 years after they were first banded. And so, yeah, they can be long lived. They've got a lot of predators also beyond, you know, the problems they've got with humans and white nose. Owls will eat them. And there's also, you know, snakes will go into caves sometimes and actually crawl around through cracks in the ceiling and snag them. Those are usually rat snakes. So that's a good question. Any suggestions on bat house? I would look at the rocket boxes. I've heard that those are really, really good. What can we do to help bats in the suburbs? So again, the bat houses are a good one. You know, it's really hard on homeowners to leave standing dead trees around their yard. But if you've got enough space in the backyard, or if you have just a few acres and you can leave a couple of trees that are dying and have bark sloughing off them, they'll be a big attractant for bats. What bats are attracted to bat houses? You can almost guarantee that you will get a big brown bat in your bat house. And then some of the other ones that we see using bat houses, everything from the northern long-eared, of course, they're getting really rare right now. Indiana bat would use them, generally not for as a maternity roost, but just for stopping overnight. But big brown bat is going to be the one you're going to see the most in the suburbs. How can we get a bat house? Get online and look and see what you can find. You could definitely order them, but you could also build one, which would be a fun project. Would it help to put up a bat maternity pole like we showed on a farm, on a steep hillside on a farm? Yes, it would. It would. So you can look into that. It's an organization called Copperhead Consulting that makes and sells the bat Brandenbark substrate, and it's a little bit expensive, but you know, what kind of price can you put on having a bat maternity pole? They do like them full sun, and so it's something you might look into. And I think we've gotten through most of the questions here. Very good. Okay, so with that, I want to thank everybody for, would a small suburban lot be appropriate for bat house? Yes, it would. Yes, it would. And it's just a fun way to connect. You know, it's like it's like having if you had a bird feeder, you know, you get to watch the birds, but with a bat house, you could sit and watch it in the evening and probably see your bats coming out and get to know them. And they have really strong sight fidelity. So if you get a bat using a bat house around your place, you can bet that it might be the same bat that you're seeing over and over. So you can maybe give them a name too. We've got one of those hanging around our porch that uses the same crack in between the rafters every time. So let's see. All right, and with that, I guess we're out of questions. Thank you everybody for being on here. Come out to Bernheim. It's not peak color yet, so we're late on our fall color this year. Some of y'all may have noticed. I think that we're going to see peak color right around this weekend into the first week of November. And we're always having good color up into the first week of November, up in the beach and Oaks and on Forest Hill Drive. So, and yes, please think about becoming a member if you're not already. You get $5 discount using the 2021 Trailblazer code. Charlotte just put a link back up there. So with that, thank you all. I hope you all have a wonderful day and a great bat week.